It is episode number 71 of the Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for tuning in. So many things to discuss today with Dr. Jay LaGuardia. We'll get to him in just a minute, but do have to first say thanks to the sponsors of the show, Midwest Meals. My buddy Dan Beck over there doing great things. I wish I had Dan's. When I was 26, I was making decisions like Dan Beck is, because he's doing amazing things and doing it locally, and also helping you not only during the pandemic and some of the struggles that go along with that, but in overall health, trying to get your macro count correct, trying to know what you're putting in your body. He's got all the good stuff. It's all there. And they got that new machine that's actually allowing you to keep your meals fresher longer. It really streamlines the whole process. So check out MidwestMeals.com. They got 13 rotating meals. They update, put new ones in there each week. Lean turkey tacos, man. I got to go with that. I don't care if it's Taco Tuesday, Taco Wednesday. It's just Taco Week. That's my jam. Use the promo code Cooper at checkout and you get 10% off your order at MidwestMeals.com. Also, thanks to Monster Energy, Monster Podcast, Monster Hydro, definitely during times when you don't think you're dehydrated. I've been outside working for the last, feels like forever. You don't really realize you're being dehydrated when you're outside in these cold winter months, but you are. So make sure you're hydrating. Monster Hydro gives you the caffeine, gives you the branched chain amino acids, and a whole bunch of different vitamins and minerals in there as well. Plus, super hydrating for you to get through your day. So check out Monster Energy, Monster Hydro at a convenience store near you. Dr. Jay LaGuardia, my friend, is back on the show. It was we talked back in April. No, I shouldn't say that. It was March 20th was the last time we spoke, and I have some great tidbits from that podcast that we were in such a different world, it seems like, way back then. But I do have to say, first off, thank you for joining. And also, I know you just had a hip replaced and you're like back to just kicking ass and taking names. It's impressive, man. How you feeling?
Doing great. Thanks for having me back on. It's always fun to chat with you, and our conversations are interesting and they go all over the place. So I think your listeners today will have much to chew on. And let me just say, I'm a big fan of Midwest Meals. I use it regularly to make sure I fulfill my macros during my workouts, so I can get back to 100%. Which, by the way, when people think of hip replacement and think of an old guy, I say, yeah, I know. It was an injury that progressed over a period of time. So, yeah, I'm kind of old, but it had more to do with an injury than the age issue.
Well, no, I think that's because I saw the post that went out after you had just gotten out of surgery, and like a couple days later, you're back at the gym. Obviously, it's not something you just go back to throwing heavy stuff around and going full tilt, but it really reiterated to me like the miracle of medicine and the things that can be done. And I don't think it's necessarily an age thing, but I think when you heard of somebody, whether it was a football player or it was always like, oh, well, that's it. You know, you're gonna notice them walking around with this, hitching their giddy up for the rest of their life. But it just amazes me how far that medicine has come and the things that doctors can do to the human body. And you're already back, working out full tilt, just kicking ass and taking names now. It's amazing.
Yeah. The thing is that I went into surgery in as top shape as I possibly could. Even the doctor came out and he said to me, he goes, we don't normally operate on people like you. The level of fitness and condition and leanness, made it so much easier for them. But my whole intention was not to impress him. My intention was to maximize and expedite the healing process so I can get back to my normal life. Right. And it also helps to own a fitness studio, F45, as we do here in Eau Claire, so I have the access of the top, quality equipment to help me on that path.
And I think you mentioned a couple of really important points there is when you have to go through something like that, and maybe not, a major surgery like that, but having yourself in a healthy state, physically, mentally, I think is huge too, because there's a lot of drain, I'm sure, that goes into knowing how active that you were before the surgery. And again, how active you are already back, just, almost just over a month out.
Yeah.
If you're not quite ready to go into that mentally, it can be like, well, you can kind of get the depression can set in, but I think if your mindset's right and your health is right and your body's in good shape, the turnaround time I think is miraculous. Not to mention the fact that the surgery is as leaps and bounds over, I think, what it was 10, 15 years ago.
For sure. And the mental side of it, you're absolutely right. For at least 3 or 4 weeks prior to the surgery, in my morning routine, when I would do my meditation, I would literally visualize, right, a successful outcome. And I also, this may sound weird to your audience, but I'm kind of eccentric when it comes to things like this, is I was literally giving thanks to my hip for getting to me to this point and all the amazing things I've been able to do in my life. You know what I mean? Rather than rejecting the joint that failed because of injury, I gave thanks, and the visualization of the outcome was so important because I already can see the end in mind, and therefore I just needed to fill in the gaps and do what I need to do.
And we talked a lot about meditation and your routine. Again, the Power, Passion, Prosperity podcast. For those who don't know, Dr. J has a phenomenal show that for anybody from any walk of life can benefit from the messages that are within there. But we did talk a lot about your routine, my routine, kind of our, the structure of our mornings, and really how even during the beginning of COVID-19, because again, we talked in March 20th. So we were, a couple days into what was the lockdowns, the safer at home ordinance, the 15 days to flatten the curve, which is, I don't know, I'm just checking my watch here, but
9 months.
I think 9 months and 15 days is at this point. But, a lot of the things we talked about, and this was in the infancy of this whole thing, was the mindset of not knowing what tomorrow is going to bring necessarily as far as what you can and can't do. That there's all the stressors that come with, they had shut the schools down. So I was, I became a teacher, in the interim, which was great. It's on my resume now. I mean, I'm not sure that's going to get me much employment, but I think a lot of it, just knowing that you start your day off with this kind of meditation. I know you do a lot of visualization for your day and the things you want to accomplish. I know there's a lot of gratitude that goes into it, but kind of explain the importance of that now that we are 9 months and 15 days into the COVID pandemic. How important is that? Because I think that we've seen there's a lot of evidence that people aren't doing that because there's a lot of stress, a lot of tension, a lot of angst, and a lot of nerves going on in the world right now. But explain the importance of having that routine to kind of start your day and how it really has kept you, positive during all of this.
Coop, your environment controls you, or you control your environment. And if you're going to be in control of your environment, you have to be intentional in the activities that you participate in to exact an outcome. And what I mean by that is, a morning routine sets the tone of the day. It gets us focused on accomplishing certain tasks, gets us focused on how do we want to show up for the day, whether it's preparing for a podcast, a sales call, a meeting with a friend, just how you want to interact with your family. And that, I try to take as much randomness out of that as possible. So to give you an example, as you also know, I do consulting with entrepreneurs. And, there were entrepreneurs that I work with that didn't do so well, like so many this year. And then there were entrepreneurs who had the best year ever. So what's the difference? Same climate, same environment, same restrictions, right? Now there's variations depending on the type of business that you're in. So I'll take that for, that's a factor. However, the ones that succeeded are the ones who chose each day to prepare their mind for success. So I have a habit of ritual of engaging the 8 habits of success every morning. Been doing it for 20 something years because I want to affect my environment. I don't want to be a victim of my environment. And that is essentially what's going on in our culture today. Right now, the biggest pandemic and I'm sure we'll cover this, right, is the pandemic of fear. And fear just grips us and moves us away from expressing our highest self. It's actually literally impossible to be at your best when you're present in fear. And then some people say, well, I'm not. But all you have to do is listen to the things you say, things that you listen to, and the actions that you take. And it's easy to see that people are steeped and just focused in fear. And so there's a small portion of our brain called the limbic system where all emotion exhibits from. And so when we're expressing fear from our limbic portion of our brain, it affects our prefrontal cortex, which is the logic portion of the brain. So you can't be in your right mind where you're stuck in fear. In other words, you shouldn't be making any kind of major decisions because you're not in a good place to be able to make the decision logically and rationally. So that's why so many decisions right now that have been made over the last year have not been good decisions, because we're not in a good place. And so being able to each morning set my intention of how do I choose to show up? What emotion do I want to experience? The information I put in, right? Clearing my mind, visualizing my outcome for my day, reading, listening to a great podcast, whatever it might be, I'm setting myself up for success. It doesn't mean I'm perfect. It doesn't mean every day goes perfectly, because it doesn't. It just gives me the tools when shit goes off. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that. When stuff goes off the rails, right? Because it invariably does. I have the skill sets to pull it back on the rails really quickly and get back to intention and focus on my outcomes.
I think there's so many valuable things to be taken out of that. Just when you talk about fear, and I don't want to call it the inescapability, but it's everywhere that you look right now. And for people that are either stuck at home or they're working reduced hours, a lot of people's time ends up on social media, paying attention to things going on in the news. And let's be honest, Jay, if you're in that realm, there's not a lot of positive things coming out of those channels at this moment. Now, occasionally someone shows a picture of a puppy or a kid or
Right.
what they had for supper last night. You're like, that looks good. I'll try that recipe. But the majority of it is depending on, the news feeds that you get from the different news outlets, what you watch on television, even the people that are in your inner circle or your close group of friends on social media. There's not a lot of, regarding COVID, there's just not a lot of these positive things being put out there. It's fear-based. It's people are not, there's confusion, which I think is an underlying factor of fear. When you don't know what's going on, you tend to be a little more frightened about the surroundings that are around you. So a lot of people you can really be overwhelmed with all this information coming in that is really all just dripping with fear. And every day it's something new. There's rarely a day that goes by where there's this great news story that comes out about something great that's happened. Now you and I will get to the vaccine conversation and how when that news came out, it seemed like, oh, well, there we go. Look at that. We've solved the world's problems. Oh, wait, let's hold up the pickup truck on that one. But other than that, every day seems to be there's another story that comes out. There's another stat that comes out. You look at the, I got the CDC website up here, and people will go to that and they'll look at just numbers and they'll just go, oh my gosh, look, we're on this trajectory. There's no curve anymore. It's just a straight line up. So I think the things that you're talking about when you talk about clearing your mind and setting your intentions for the day and how you're going to navigate through the river that is each and every day is so important. Because if you're getting up right away in the morning and the first thing you're doing is putting your phone in front of your face and scrolling through your news feed, you may not even have a foot out of bed yet, and you're going, oh shit. Well, guess what that's happening today? And it's not just COVID stuff. I mean, obviously there's a whole political landscape that is insanely negative right now. That before your foot hits the floor, as you step out of bed, that can set the tone for your day. And I think people need to be aware of how you can take a little time to yourself, take a little time for your mind before you jump into the world that is maybe a little chaotic these days.
Gandhi said, protect the garden of your mind. Don't allow people with dirty feet to walk through it.
Mm.
And what he was talking about, obviously, is what we choose to engage in will determine how far we go in life. And so I've been on social media, other than my fan page, where I'm only putting positive stuff out there. I've been on a fast for 4 months now.
Mm.
It's the best thing I've ever done. And I did this last year and it felt amazing. And then I kind of got sucked back into it, with all the stuff that was going on with COVID. I'm a voracious reader. I do research, and then you get caught up in the political aspect of it. I just saw myself and I didn't like who I was. And I didn't like where I was going. So I knew what was feeding that. And it was all the negativity. So I've been fasting, and it's the best fast I've ever done. I feel more energetic, more at peace, more calm, more focused on my purpose and serving and helping people than I've ever been before. And when we think about, you brought up a really good point. You said, it's true. First thing you get up in the morning, and for most people, they leave their phone right by the bed, which is a whole nother conversation. It's really dangerous for you because your phone is emitting EMFs. And if you have a 5G phone, you better put that phone in the garage at night. Okay?
Somebody else's garage.
Yeah,
neighbor.
I'm not kidding. But that's another conversation. And the first thing you do is you pick up that phone and you look at that phone and you look at the newsreels or news alerts, whatever the case may be. And all of a sudden, that same emotional cycle kicks in. What happens is your body starts to produce adrenaline and cortisol. Mm. And these are two hormones that, when they're in high amounts consistently, lead to pretty nasty stuff long term. Cortisol suppresses testosterone in men. Mm. So it leads to depression and weight gain. And it leads to anxiety and loss of muscle tone and strength and feeling less than. It downregulates our immune system. So it literally makes you more susceptible to the thing you're literally fearing about. It's making you more susceptible if you come in contact with getting sick, or if you do get sick, having a worse outcome. Mm-hmm. So what we don't realize is every emotion manifests itself physically in our body, either in a good way or a positive way. And what it does, it literally triggers our genes to respond. And so if done so over a chronic period of time, then eventually it could throw the body into a state of dis-ease. And so, all the nasty stuff we all know about.
Right. And it's, and we can go on a whole nother conversation about social media and its addiction, and how it, what was the social network, but there was a great documentary that came out on Netflix. I can't recall the name. It was The Social Dilemma. That was it. Yeah. That talked about the addiction that people can get to social media and to reaction, and the boost that you get when somebody likes your post, or the endorphins that enter your body, and how it's affecting kids in their perspective of not just social media, but how the world functions. But a great documentary. I recommend people just for knowledge sake to check it out and maybe do some self-reflecting on the effect that social media has in your life. But I do feel that there's people that have, especially now because of COVID, and whether the reasoning is this makes me feel closer to people I can't necessarily be in contact with, or I just want to be aware of what's going on, but that becomes the crux of their entire day. I mean, there's from, again, the foot out of bed to the last thing you're doing before you go, before you fall asleep, where you see there's memes about people that are laying in bed with their phone above their head and they fall asleep and their phone knocks them, hits them in the forehead, and they're like, oh, I guess maybe I should go to sleep. Oh, well, maybe I'll just check this one more thing. So I think all of that information that is circling out, and a lot of it at this point, very negative based or more so fear based, creates this anxiety that starts if you get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, or you get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and maybe, maybe you are working right now, but there's 3 or 4 times throughout the day you're checking on that. Then you get home and you're, maybe you have a little dinner, then you're back on it. You got TV on, you're watching the news. Like, there is no external vantage point. You're not looking at anything else that is going on in your life besides what is happening on your device. And I think that leads to that anxiety. It leads to that fear. It leads to people living day to day, week to week, now month to month, 9 months, going on a year in this cyclone that is all based on negativity. And they become introverted, and they become not wanting to go out, and even if the rains are off, even if you are able to go out and do certain things, which thankfully in Wisconsin we have some ability to go out and enjoy some things in a limited capacity. But this could be, when we see the numbers, I'll say it like this: when we see the numbers someday, and I don't know when that day is going to be, it could be 2022, 2025, when somebody does the research on the effects outside of the virus itself of COVID, everything from the suicide rate, domestic violence, but really the change in people's mentality of how they interact with other humans, how they view themselves, and how they live their lives in fear instead of just living their lives and experiencing all there is to experience. I think those numbers are going to really, if you can quantify them, if you could put them on a scale next to where we're at numbers wise with the results and the effects of COVID, there's going to be some eye-opening things, I think, that come out of this when that research is eventually done.
There's actually already some preliminary research that has been done. And I just want to say, anything that has the power to do good has also the power to do bad. And so, social media can be a good thing. It can connect people. It's a great way for e-commerce, it's got its good side, particularly when it comes to young kids. My concern is self-worth is based on likes and follows. You know what I mean? And so, and even that, if the self-worth is strong, it's really built on a house of cards. The self-worth isn't built on likes and follows. So either way, it has a negative effect on kids. So it's a concern. But there's lots of hardships that people have suffered and experienced. Think about this. And this was as of August 31st of 20. 163,700 businesses have closed their doors since the start of the pandemic. Of those, 60%, 97,000 and change, are now permanently closed. So meanwhile, the collective wealth, get this, of 655 billionaires rose by more than 36%. How does that work when everybody else has been struggling for the most part? And interesting enough, they found with Brits, over 3 million of them have gone without food at some point during this process. And a Canadian survey found that, and this was published in October, 22% of Canadians experienced high anxiety levels, and 4 times greater than pre-pandemic levels. And 13% reported severe depression, and drug overdose and epidemics have significantly worsened in Canada. And in Japan, which didn't implement any lockdowns at all, their statistics show in October of 2020, more people died of suicide than they died of COVID. So the numbers are there. They're not being reported. Must give you pause. Why, right? Why isn't that information available? And if you go and you Google it, it's very, very hard to find. So it's being suppressed. Why is that the case? I don't have an answer, but it's sure suspicious.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, I think when you do start to do research, that's the first thing that you realize is that the information that you would question, or it would give you pause to say, well, I wonder, like I was talking about the ramifications outside of the virus itself on things like domestic violence, things like suicides, depression, anxiety. It is more difficult to find those things. Why? Again, you and I have the same answer for that. I'm not sure. It seems like information that in April I could readily look up, and ta-da, here would be, a couple of great, studies, some research that have been done. But it does seem like a lot of information is being suppressed. And you and I can get into a whole, I mean, from my 20 years in radio, I'm a huge, First Amendment free speech guy. So I don't really like just listening to one particular, we'll say, narrative. I like to really listen to a lot of different angles and then be able to step back, take in all the information, and be able to make an educated decision on my own. But the trouble is that is more challenging than just turn on TV, look at my news feed, and get the information that is coming at me. Because if you have to do research, that takes time, energy, and a lot of people are without that for whatever specific reason. So there's a lot of question marks around the numbers, because you can get the numbers on COVID. I have them right up here. Total cases, 22.7 million. Cases in the last 7 days, 1.7 million. Total deaths. All that information is readily available. It's one click at cdc.gov, and I got that information. But to dig a little deeper to find out the other ramifications of it, economically, again, it's continuing to have an effect on the economy. But in other aspects, it's a little more difficult to find that information. And again, if that doesn't raise your eyebrow a little bit to why that is, maybe it should. Hopefully listening to this podcast, you'll go, me in the back. I'm going to raise my hand because I have a couple of questions. But it's a strange time. And I think a lot of, in my opinion, at least, a lot of what we're seeing on the political side of things, and I don't want to get too deep down that rabbit hole, but I think a lot of what we've witnessed has a lot to do with the current state of everybody's mentality. I think because of lockdowns, I think because of information, misinformation, people not understanding why from county to county, city to city, state to state, coast to coast, region to region, lake to lake, the rules are all different. Like, why aren't we being, how is this virus supposedly different here? Now, I understand higher populated areas, there's going to be some different rules that need to be in place. But when you have research that shows certain things are not big, hubs for large outbreaks, and those things are being suppressed out in California. My mother lives out there. I talked to her just the other day, and she's like, I haven't got my hair done in 10 months. She's, she has to go outside. She's walking outside and people are putting masks up. And I'm like, you are outside, right? And how far? Well, they're on a different trail. I'm like, I know you hate snow, Mom, but bring it on back. Bring it on back to the W. We'll walk outside mask free. It'll be amazing. But there's so many questions in the air. And I think one of the things that I know I wanted to talk to you about specifically that I really think is not being talked about, and I think there's a plethora of reasons for it, and that is just general overall health. The comorbidity factor is 2.5. There's 2.5 comorbidity factors for COVID. So basically, there's always at like 2 to 2.5 underlying things, conditions that are happening for those who are, in fact, not just infected with COVID, but those who ended up, getting severely ill, and for those who end up passing away. There's obviously the age, the ages that are in there, 65 plus. Obviously, those numbers are very high, where you have, the younger population, younger generations are less susceptible. But it seems like just generally being healthy, supplements that are readily available, that have been scientifically proven to stop COVID, that have been proven to keep you, not just from COVID, but to supercharge your immune system, readily available. These things are just not being discussed. And I'm not sure if you have an answer to why that is, but I entertain your thoughts.
Well, it's, I don't know. It's been one of my biggest concerns and unanswered questions since the beginning of this. And look, I can give you my take on why that's the case. For some, it may sound conspiratorial, but I have no good reason why it's not, other than the fact that there's a lot of money in sickness, number one. Okay? Does that mean that we don't want society to be, we want people to get sick and die? I don't think that's the case. It's not what I'm saying. And I also want to make this note here is some of the things, that you and I may talk about today about this particular topic may be completely new to your listeners. In fact, I would suggest most of it is going to be completely new. I don't know how much we're going to talk about this topic, but I've spent 9 months just researching, reading journals. I'm kind of weird that way. And I've done 9 podcasts myself on COVID. I had a team of experts on. We've discussed this. So because I think our responsibility as citizens is to be informed, number one. Number two is to question always, particularly authority. The assumption that those in authority have our best intentions in mind, I think it's been proven more times in history that you cannot guarantee that. You cannot accept that as a truth. And so therefore, you have a responsibility to yourself and your family to inform yourself to the best of your ability so you can make the best decisions for you and your family. That's number one. Number two, why is it that thousands, tens of thousands of preeminent experts in every field of health, virologists, epidemiologists, scientists, biologists, researchers, are being censored left and right? What altered universe did I wake up in where there's no longer a dialogue because there is enough contrarian science? Okay. I love it One of the reasons I got off social media, I was so pretty much fed up with all the social media medical experts.
Oh, yes.
It's just amazing how social media makes everybody an expert. I've had 35 years in healthcare and research and I'm humble enough to, I don't know everything by any stretch of the imagination. I'm still learning, still expanding my mindset, but I know a lot about biology, I know a lot about physiology, I know a lot about human anatomy. And any logical, objective human being has got to say to herself, why are they being censored? Why don't they want me to hear these things? What are they hiding? Why isn't a conversation, if there's confliction within the science, why isn't that being discussed? I bet you most of your listeners don't know that nearly 75% of all medical science is done by pharmaceutical companies, approved by pharmaceutical companies. Who, by the way, is selling you their product. So this is the aspect where I say to you, I think it's profit motive. It's so much easier to say to somebody, here are the 5 nutrients you need to make sure you're sufficient in to reduce your chance of getting sick. And if you do get sick, significantly reducing your chance of having a poor outcome or death. It's really simple. And we know it. I mean, there's hundreds, if not thousands of studies on vitamin D.
Yep.
Right? We know how important vitamin C, even intravenously early on during COVID, is. Now, I don't know if that's being done in hospitals. Maybe it is. I haven't heard much about it. We also know how important zinc and magnesium are as well, too. Now, interesting enough, think about this, right? Researchers have found that people have metabolic syndrome. Now, these are people who have heart diabetes or overweight, or they have high cholesterol, lifestyle. I call them lifestyle diseases because they can be altered with change in lifestyle, except type 1 diabetes. We know that with metabolic syndrome, obesity, diabetes, all those things, it worsens the outcome from COVID-19 as well as other infections, right? Like the common flu. And obesity also increases the duration that you carry the virus and you share it longer. So in other words, so people who talk about masks, you're not being responsible by not wearing a mask because you're harming other people. Let's even assume that's true. Being overweight is doing the same thing. You're carrying the virus longer. So I have a responsibility to you, but you don't have a responsibility to me. Understand what I mean? Yeah. So it's essentially negative in a society that tends to be in a really poor metabolic state. And there isn't a species on Earth unhealthier than humans, and no place worse than in the US. We are the sickest population anywhere in the world with the quote unquote best healthcare system. And so the reason we're having poor outcomes is because people are nutritionally deficient, they're overweight, they're deconditioned, and unfortunately, too many people are unwilling to do anything about changing it.
Yeah, I mean that's the. It feels like the free pass, and I know there's a lot of people can call it fat shaming, and you can call it, well, there's so many things out there where it's not okay. It's okay to call somebody who smokes now. 20, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, it was like smoking was just something people did. Now it is like, it's like you see somebody smoking and they're within 25 feet of a building and they can get a fine, so that's like that's smoke shaming. Like that's cool. Like, but we haven't gotten to a point yet where, even having a conversation, having dialogue with somebody about health and nutrition is a safe space, because the automatic, I think, reaction is I'm being fat shamed. You're calling me out on my weight. And obviously there's going to be downside to that. And I was just listening to a podcast, Dr. Mark Gordon, I believe, was on it. And he was talking about exactly the same supplements that you talked about. So again, he knows them. I know them. These things that are readily available that if you knew that you should be putting in your body: vitamin D3, zinc, magnesium. We talked about inophores a little bit, which is, like turmeric is one of them. Was it cortisone is another one. Also, and this, I don't know if we're going to get flagged for this, but hydrochloroquine. Anybody remember that whole thing? It's also, they're like, everybody just had a flashback to, wait, what? All that is an inophore, which really helps those specific, especially zinc, get into your cell. And what zinc has been shown to do is to be able to stop the coronavirus and other viruses like it from attaching itself to your cell and thus, reproducing itself and causing the infection. So these things, you can get all of those things. Talks about DHEA in there. Pregnenolone, I think, is another one he has in there. So there's like the super pack of things, these supplements that you could be taking to get your immune system back up, not just during COVID.
Right.
During all these are just things to be able to go up. Nobody wants to be sick. No one wants to get the flu. Nobody wants any of that. It's miserable. It's horrible. You feel dumb for like a week, even after you recover, because all the things that it does to your body and the brain drain, and you're not in a good spot. And for now 9 months and 15 days to flatten the curve, here we are with this readily accessible information, with these readily accessible supplements and vitamins, and nobody in mainstream media, nobody at the CDC, Fauci, nobody saying, hey, actually, I do think I saw something on the CDC. They finally said something about, well, zinc levels across the country are relatively low. I'm like, well, that's good. Like, where was this information back in March when we could have, been like, oh, here's a super pack of vitamins. We should market that, Dr. J. Like, yes. Here you go. Here's your VitaPack. Take this for immune system boosting and to help protect you from this. But a lot of this information, and this goes back to what we were talking about with having to really dig in to find any of the numbers about the other effects of lockdowns and safer at home and kids being home from school, it seems like it's tougher to find that information. And again, another reason, if you're not raising your eyebrow at things, if you're just learning about these supplements on this podcast of all podcasts that are available out there, you're welcome first and foremost, but you got to start, asking questions, and you got to start, really doing due diligent research, because you know what? Everybody's sick of this shit. Nobody wants to, we're done. Like, okay, there's not going to be a new normal. I mean, we kind of all have come to the logic that just the way that I think COVID has transformed us as human beings and how we interact with others, if we get back to where we used to be, it's going to take a long time. But people got to have knowledge. They got to find out what's going on in real life.
Yeah, and I didn't want to talk much about this topic because it's like gasoline. But
right.
I did a podcast on the unintended consequences of wearing masks and the impact, social impact it's having, and will have for a very, very long time. If you think this is all occurring, in a bubble and there's no repercussions long term, you're delusional. You really are. You know what I'm saying? I want to get back to you had talked about zinc. When you take zinc on the onset of feeling cold or a flu or corona, whatever the case may be, by taking 75 milligrams a day can cut the duration of your sickness up to 6 to 7 days, almost a week. Cut it. And the thing about vitamin D, and this is probably some of the stuff that people don't know, way over, particularly us here in the northern hemisphere in Wisconsin, because we lack sunlight, for a significant portion of the year. By the time we get to February, even people who are supplementing with vitamin D, our levels have dropped low. And over 85% of the population in the northern hemisphere particularly have got significantly depleted vitamin D levels below 20 nanograms per deciliter. I've seen research that indicates when it drops below 20, if it stays there, it's 100% guarantee of getting cancer. 100%, because vitamin D activates 2,000 genes, and including with vitamin K dependent proteins, if your levels are high, it actually repairs your genes. So, and it also is a powerful antimicrobial and antiviral peptide. So, my recommendations I've done, for my clients, is you want your vitamin D levels to be anywhere between 60 and 100, right? I had mine tested not long ago. I was at 81. Actually, just prior to surgery, I had it tested. So I do it in this time of the year, and then I'll do it again in the summer. So I do it twice a year. It's not an expensive test unless you go to a typical health facility. Then they'll charge you. So when I went in for my pre-op test, she wanted me to get a vitamin T test, and I said to her, "Yeah, sure." And she said, and I said to her, "Well, how much is that?" She goes, "It's about $350." And I said, "No, thanks." I said, "I can order it myself for 40. So just think about the markup there. Anyway, I got a little sidetracked there. But you need the magnesium as well too, because it requires it impacts immune cell function. And if your magnesium levels are low, your immune function is going to be altered as well too. So all these work in concert together. So instead of saying, "Well, I'm going to take vitamin D," okay, I have no problem with that. But you need to be taking vitamin D with K2, because without K2 in it, vitamin D levels, as they begin to rise, can oxidize arterial walls and harden them. So you get atherosclerosis. So the K2 makes sure it doesn't become oxidized, and it gets actually into the cells and utilized for proper sufficiency as necessary. What I'm just trying to get to here, Coop, is this. People have way more control over their well-being than they ever imagined. And they should be more focused on lifestyle and choices they're making each and every day, which will have a far greater outcome and far greater impact on whether they get sick, don't get sick. If they get sick, how bad, reducing their chance against every chronic disease that now exists and has been exploding in this country.
How important is it? You talked a little about blood work, and I think it's something that it is not that it's new, but it feels like understanding where you're deficient. And again, I'm somebody who supplements fairly regularly. I try to do the research behind it. Like, okay, well, like you talked about vitamin D without K2, like, okay, great, you're taking this, but how it all functions. But for a person to go in, how important is it to go in, get that blood work done so that you can say, or your medical professional or whatever, if you the at-home kit, however you get it done, to really look at your levels and understand, okay, here's where I need to supplement. Here's where maybe in my diet, I'm getting enough of these things. I'm getting enough, calcium, getting enough, vitamin, the other vitamins that are important, outside of a multi. How important is that for people to really look at, so they have an understanding of exactly where they are deficient? Because I don't think that many of the population is aware. If you said, well, I'm feeling a little iron deficient today, like it takes until something really bad happens, or you have a elongated, fatigue, or you're like, man, I'm getting enough rest and I'm exercising. It's like, I don't understand why I really feel this way, until people maybe take action on it. But how important is it for people to get that blood work done so they do have a comprehensive understanding of exactly what they need to be putting in their bodies outside of their regular diet? Because newsflash, you can't get all the things you need to function optimally just by eating.
Yeah, especially the American diet.
Right.
If you're eating a typical, even if you were eating the cleanest, purest, totally organic diet, I'm talking organic fruits, vegetables, meats, you're still going to be deficient in about 3 or 4 supplements because it's impossible to get from our diet.
Right.
I'm releasing a podcast next week with one of the preeminent nutritional companies that I've been working with, my team has been working with for over a decade, Nutritional Dynamics. And I have one of their executives on, been with the company for 40 years. And I knew this, but I forgot. And he said to me, he goes, a spinach salad in 1960 and now, you would need to have 11 bowls of that spinach salad to get the same nutrients that were in that back in the 60s.
Wow.
Okay. So it's from soil depletions, it's pesticides, it's, we can go on forever. Back to your question. I'm an evidence-based guy, right? I don't like to randomly shoot at things just hoping that it would work. It's a waste of time, it's a waste of money, and it may make it worse. See, that's the thing. Nutritional science has come such a long way. When I first started 30-something years ago and where it is now, it's night and day. Mm-hmm. And so as we have continued to expand our knowledge and our practice, we do 2 things. We do blood work and we do DNA testing. Mm-hmm. Why? Because we want to know exactly, based on your genetic makeup and based on whatever insufficiencies that you may be experiencing, that we target specific and then just don't shoot in the dark. Because as you mentioned before, iron is one of the most abused supplements. People just take it. You never want to take iron if you don't need it, because it's really bad for your heart and circulatory system. So evidence-based, I would suggest to your listeners, find a practitioner who is well-versed, well-trained, who does DNA blood testing analysis. And one point I want to make final about supplementations. There's a lot of garbage on the market. EMA said in 2009, 92% of retail supplements are not absorbable, what we call bioavailable. That means only 8% is utilized. 92% winds up in your toilet and in the city sewer plant. Okay, so A, you're wasting your money. B, because the lack of quality of those supplements causes additional oxidative stress. So oxidative stress is where this is precursors to all underlying chronic disease, cancer, heart disease. So literally you could be contributing to what you're trying to prevent when you take poor supplements. And so the podcast we talk about is how to identify quality supplements, why it's important to make sure you're purchasing quality supplements. So the bioavailability, you're getting what you're taking and you're taking what you need.
No, super important to understand, especially if you are making that investment, which I think is, if you look at healthcare costs, you look at everything else, the most important thing you can invest in is your health. And I think supplementation, and I think mentioned a lot of great things on here today about do the right thing. And if you're going to be investing money in supplements, make sure that you're getting what you need out of them. Otherwise, it's, again, there was a Big Bang Theory where, Sheldon Cooper goes, why are you buying that multivitamin? It's that hard packed multivitamin you can't break open with a hammer.
Yeah.
You may as well just flush it down the toilet because you're getting the same amount of result out of the whole thing. But definitely do your research on what you're taking with your supplements. Now, I want to get you out here in this because I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on the vaccine and things that are coming down the pike. But obviously there was this tremendously quick creation of an RNA vaccine, which has never been done before. Never happened in the history of mankind. We've made viruses. I think I was reading the H1N1 vaccine was like 6 months. It came out pretty quickly, but this is a completely different animal. And to avoid more flagging of this particular live stream podcast, hydrochloroquine. What questions do people need to ask before? Because again, I want to say I'm in a stand back and wait situation right now, but what questions do people need to really ask before blindly going in and getting this vaccine and thinking that everything is going to be great once everybody has it? Because I think there's been some verbiage that has come out about even after it's still going to be the same. And people, I think that's maybe started to, again, raise that eyebrow on some people as well. So your thoughts on people, or questions that people should ask before getting the vaccine, whether it's the Pfizer or the Moderna or any other one that's coming out.
Yeah. This issue is such a personal issue. And people are very passionate about one side or the other. And I respect both positions. And I think that's what's great about living in a country like in which we do, is people can choose what's best for them. I have a real issue when someone tries to decide what's best for me, because my biological makeup is different than yours, right? You might get a vaccine, or I might get a vaccine. It does really fine for me. It has no repercussions, at least not in the immediacy. Might long term, don't know that. And you may get it and have transverse myelitis and get paralyzed, because that's what's been happening. As one of the complications of this vaccine, and so on and so forth. So who am I to tell you what you need to do? Again, do your own research, make a decision, because that decision could have serious consequences. So now, while the vaccine is sold, as a way to end the pandemic and return us to the normal, it can't. And since it's only been, evaluated for its ability to lessen COVID-19, right? It only reduces the symptoms. It doesn't eliminate the risk of infection. It doesn't prevent you from getting COVID. I saw a meme. Oh God, I don't want to screw this up, but it was funny as hell. My wife showed it to me, because every once in a while she'll show me things like that because she knows I'm on my social media diet. That's something to do wearing a condom and having sex. Imagine if you can wear a condom, or you would wear a condom during sex, but yet you're still, a really good chance you're going to get pregnant. Well, what's the point?
Right.
So my point is, what's the point? Now, here's something really important. I don't want to make a joke out of this, right? So while some COVID-19 vaccines have been granted emergency use, and utilization, they still yet have not completed stage 3 clinical trials. And the data points won't be collected for up to 24 months after the injections. Ladies and gentlemen, you are participating in the largest study in history. We won't know the effects of taking this vaccine for a minimum until 2023, January of 2023. Now, we do know, how do I know this, right? Done my research. Cool. If I did the research and the research said to me, greatest thing since sliced bread, 0 risk, 100% guarantee not getting COVID, 100% immunity the rest of your life, I'm all in. I'm all in. Makes sense to me, right? No risk, all reward. Not the case. Not the case. So the adverse side effects, again, are still relatively unknown. There have been reports of people dying, medical people, quite a few, not getting to the media. There was just one the other day, because they're not going to promote that stuff.
No.
Right? So it's unknown whether, and it's suspected that there may be some fertility issues, making females sterile. And so it's not recommended for pregnant, childbearing women who are considering becoming pregnant. What does that tell you? That would be a concern to me.
Yeah.
So here's the question. What will it do to kids? We don't know. So you asked me to come up with some questions. What I'm doing is opening up the concept. Are you okay with taking that risk if you gave it to your kid and didn't know until they were in their early 20s, they became sterile because of this vaccine they took? How would you feel?
Yeah.
You know, or 5 years from now, you talked about the brand new technology of using messenger RNA as a way of delivering the antigen into, and so then the body recognizes and creates its own antibodies, right? Which has never been done before. They've tried to come up with coronavirus vaccines for 30 years and they failed. In fact, the guy who led the research study, even last year, and this is a guy, now get this, right? He's the head of Baylor Medical School. He said, you could take up to 100 vaccines a day and you would be fine. Now, I don't know where he got that information. I don't know if I would buy into that, but even he said they will never develop an effective coronavirus vaccine because they've tried it for 30 years. And all of a sudden now it's fast-tracked in 9 months. Without it. So they bypass stage 1. So what's stage 1? Animal trials. Every time they came up with a prospective vaccine they thought could work, they go to stage 1, which is animal trials. And every time, those animals experience what they call a super response. So they would get injected and their immune systems would like go on hyper, right? And create this cytokine storm, causing all sorts of nasty stuff, including death in these primates. Every time they developed it, thought it had a possibility, went to stage 1, they shut it down. So now we're in stage 2, all right, delivering it, and then stage 3 is what we're going to see over the next 2 years. So I don't know, man. I'm not comfortable with it. I certainly would be comfortable with it for my kids or granddaughter. But I also want the opportunity to choose for me. You do you, I'll do me.
Yeah. I think that gets into another great podcast we could have, is talking about just some of the things that are out there on the table. And this, gets more away from COVID itself into human rights and to constitutional rights. And, there's this, I mean, if you dig below the surface, because this is not stuff you're going to see on the nightly news. It's not stuff you're going to read on the local news. You have to do the research on it. But there are things that are being, under the cover of darkness, under the cover of night, it seems like, being brought into idea, like the chance for them to, inoculate children without their parents' permission during school. I mean, there's just things that are out there. Again, hasn't been passed yet, but it's, I mean, to know that those types of things are being brought up. And again, you and I had a great conversation back in March. We had a great, I'm going to say it was a back and forth because you're both were on the same page about non-elected officials making decisions for us and our health. And again, it goes back to, I'll make my decision, you make your decision. If we do our research, everything will be hopefully okay. Hopefully in 24 months, we're not all just like, okay, well, we didn't take the vaccine, so we got to fight the zombies off now. This is where the apocalypse comes in because we didn't fully do that stage 3 research. It was just a large clinical trial on the populace.
Shot in the
but
dark.
I do, yeah. Again, it's like it's like stormtroopers in Star Wars. Like they those assholes can never shoot anything. Just ping, ping. They're just like shooting, and hopefully at one point they get a Wookiee in the shoulder, and that's it. They're just not good. But a lot of great information, Dr. J, and I appreciate it because I know that you are a diligent researcher and you do scrape below the surface things that you're not going to find. It's not going to be in the first 4 things that come up on Google when you do a search. You're going to have to scroll down a little bit and even dig from there. But I know you've done your research. You know what you're talking about. And for me personally, learning stuff on this podcast, and for the listeners and those who are viewing right now, we thank you for doing that research because, again, a lot of eyebrow raising. A lot of And
it should be. I mean, that's not the natural human state should be inquisitive.
Absolutely.
I put a post up on my Facebook page. If you could choose one, which one would you choose? Right? Certainty or curiousness? And it blew me away. I thought most people would choose certainty because a lot of people are uncertain about whatever, right?
Right.
But 70% of respondents came back with curiosity. And I love that because curiosity is what expands the mind. Curiosity is is at the forefront of learning. If we just have to be certain and comfortable all the time and somebody take care of us and pat us on the back and make us feel good and give us cookies and milk, we're doomed. We're doomed as a species. Because all innovation came with the concept, what's possible?
Mm-hmm.
And if you could start with what's possible and go from there, life could be pretty cool, really.
Right. I mean, you look at a guy like Elon Musk.
Yeah.
I mean, just you want to talk about that? He doesn't want certainty. I mean, he wants to make sure that the rockets go up, but he wants to learn at every single point because. I mean, when your goal is to colonize Mars because we've fucked this planet up so bad, you got to ask questions. You got to be like, where are those big caverns we need to find so we can get away from the toxic radiation on Mars? I mean, you have to be curious about those things, but there's a lot to be said about that. And it's inspiring, I think. And it must have been for you to see that, okay, good. People still have this innate desire to learn more, to want to understand more. And I guess it gives you hope because, the people that have that hopefully will go off and they will do the finite research. They will look into things. They will ask questions. And that's been a big strange part of this whole thing is it feels like something we talked about before we started today. We grew up questioning all authority. That's what there are freaking songs written about it. John Cougar Mellencamp.
The whole 60s was about anti-authoritarianism.
You question your parents, you question your teachers.
Yeah, so Coup, the people who are in charge right now were anti-authoritarians as 60s, right? Free love, pot, whatever, right? Whatever, you do you. Fine. Now they're running the show, and it's you follow me, and don't you ever question anything that I say because I know better than you because I'm smarter than you. Man, you got to run from that mindset. Run from that mindset.
Well, they said pot's okay now, so that was like leaving a cookie behind. Like, hey, so it's cool. Like pot's cool now. Like we were wrong. The whole 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, we were wrong. So there's your little cookie. There's your treat. Now just everything else. Make sure you just keep on following the train because it's gonna leave without you. But yeah, man, a lot of great points on this one, and I appreciate your time. I'm glad that you're doing better. The Power, Passion, Prosperity podcast, a bunch of great episodes. You're doing a bunch of great things, and again, furthering the knowledge. That curiosity. If people are truly curious about how this is all working, not just with COVID, but Dr. J does great things. We talked about entrepreneurship and how to manage through all of these things, supplementation, asking the questions that nobody's asking. You're doing great things, and I appreciate you taking some time off to fill me in, to fill the listeners in. It means a lot. We're all in this together, except are we in this together?
I hope so, because it's the only way we can get through it. You know what I mean? We can't. A country divided will fall. I didn't say that. I can't remember who said that. But a nation divided will fall, and we've got a lot of healing to do.
We do. Dr. J. LaGuardia, appreciate you. Make sure you follow his page on Facebook, Dr. J. LaGuardia. That's the only place he's posting. So don't try to friend him, because he's on a sabbatical. He's on the great cleanse of social media, which is doing great things. I might take your advice on that. That sounds like a great plan. Thank you again, sir. I appreciate it, man.
My privilege. Anytime, man. I enjoy our conversation.
Awesome. Dr. J. LaGuardia, always a pleasure to have you on, sir. For all of you who tuned in, who are live on Facebook, on Twitter, on our Instagram, we're on the Twitch, we're everywhere right now with this thing, and still haven't been taken down. So I guess that's a good sign. Maybe the fact checkers haven't checked our facts yet. But you can also follow us on all of those social media sites. Welcome to Cooperville Podcast, at No Limit Cooper on all those as well for my personal stuff. On Twitch, twitch.tv/No Limit Cooper, and whatever podcast platform you're listening on, you can subscribe and get updates and leave a comment, leave a rating. That also helps us out with help getting the word out. We appreciate it. And to Midwest Meals and Monster Energy, thank you for sponsoring the podcast. If you have interest in sponsoring the podcast and keeping the free speech revolution going, Cooper at welcometocooperville.com, and we'll make things happen. So thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate you. Take care of one another.